All right, look at us all over the internet. Welcome, guys. Another Haz Mat guys roundtable here with Mike and Kosh. I think Jason's on assignment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike is in quarantine. It looks like. Mike, are you okay?
Good to go.
All right. I'm very proud of you.
I'm
Hey,
too
does anybody know how this works? I want to try and get this into my. Will that work in a Guinness? Will it
You know
drop
what?
in there?
It might. It
That
might.
might work, right?
It might be also a sanitation thing. It might be. It might work out.
All right, I'll try that after the show. Okay.
What a crazy time, right?
This
Whoa.
is nuts.
It is pretty crazy. I was at work recently, and they're taking some very drastic steps at work to prevent cross contamination across crews. So they have us divided up into four individual groups of guys, and basically it's an ABCD chart, if you would, if anybody really knows about that stuff. But if A gets contaminated, then it goes to a three group chart, and they take A off of line, and they're going to play it by ear by that. So it's an interesting premise. It seems to be rather robust, but
Wait a second. Wait a second. So does that mean right now only 4 people in the firehouse can get sick?
No.
Because if one from each group gets sick, that's it. The whole firehouse is wiped out.
Oh yeah, that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Yes.
And this is why I'm glad I'm retired.
Yeah. So when you have that, the exchange at the change of tours, there is a very real, social distancing is a plus. In fact, on today on our group for the fall firehouse, I told them that the plumbers were here, and they installed new noise activated valves on the urinals and the toilets and the sinks. So when you go to it, so you don't have to touch it, you just got to yell at the sink, and it'll start to flush. And so guys have been walking around all day just yelling at the sinks.
Yeah.
Good
Clap
times.
on, clap off. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that never gets old. But
Is there? I mean, we did a PSA yesterday,
Very good, by the way.
trying to get thank you. Trying to get some people on board. I actually had a guest of the show because I've been a little bit of an a-hole, I guess, on Facebook, and when people are like, "Oh, this is all BS. This is media hype," I basically write something along the lines of, "Well, I hope nobody's actually listening to you." And I got an email, a message back from him that's like, "Okay, well, like, tell me why." And I did, and he still didn't believe me. But it's just amazing that everybody. It's like we want to see the people around us just drop before we'll even acknowledge that there's something going on.
I will freely admit that I was one of those that were a little skeptical. I think some of that just being in our field, people were making, a lot of us were making jokes, and don't get our humor sometimes. And I will admit I am taking this a little more seriously than I have been from a lot of the research I've been doing and reading on my own. And yes, I can read small words.
I've been looking at pictures, so.
Oh, okay, so we're good.
Yeah.
But let me ask you guys a question, because I was thinking about this the other day. In 2001, when we had all the powder calls, right? And you guys obviously were right there with the main, real stuff, if you will. Since 2001, we have been sort of, kind of, and I'm talking about the fire service now, or emergency services, sort of, kind of preparing for the WMD, right? And let me stop right there. I am not calling this that by any means. But what I'm saying is we've been preparing ourselves for that biological, right? And how we dress, and the PPE and dressing out the back of the ambulances and so on and so forth. And it is just amazing to me the amount of emails and text messages that I've gotten saying, "What do we do?" Like they've forgotten the last 19 years or whatever it was of training that we've done.
Well, all right.
Am I wrong or am I missing?
No, you're right on. I think there's a kind of a, well, it's the idea that everything behaves a little bit differently. And I think that's really what it is, right? Like Ebola is going to transmit differently than AIDS. AIDS is going to transmit differently than the flu. Corona is going to transmit differently. So I think, like, if you were to tell somebody, hey, like we had an Ebola outbreak, I think understanding the mechanism by which Ebola transfers and understanding that, like, okay, you're not really going to get Ebola till end stage. You know, you have to have symptoms before you, like, all those things. I think people don't understand the nuances of the virus. So when they say, what do we do? I think really that's the direction that they're looking for, right? Like, what do we do? I think is a way of asking, is this any different than what we would normally do? Like, are we doing things, you know, is there something about this that I should know ahead of time? Is this formed via droplets? Is it on surfaces? Is bleach going to kill it? Or is it going to be in dried blood for 24 days like other stuff? So that's more the feeling that I get when we start to dive in. When I start to dive into that question, like, well, what do you mean? What do we do? Because you're right. Basic precautions are basic precautions, right? But I think that seems to be more what they're trying to ask without knowing how to ask that.
Yeah, you know, I think that's true. But like one of the emails I got was, "Hey, what PPE should we be wearing?" And that their chief was going totally off the rails with some line of thinking. And you know, I kind of thought, hey, what have we been practicing since 2001 for WMD stuff, for biologicals, for, you know, what do we do for Ebola? You know, don't try to reinvent the wheel. You might need to adjust the spoke or something,
right?
But don't try to reinvent the wheel, especially if you already have something in place.
You know what's really scary? I was having a conversation. I won't say with who and I won't say where, but they were like, yeah, we don't have enough equipment and we're trying to figure out a way to reuse PPE.
Whoa.
I was like, holy crap.
Oh, wow.
Like, they don't have enough gowns, they don't have enough gloves, they don't have enough face masks, or they were literally trying to figure out how to reuse PPE.
You know, and I think some of that problem, and I can speak to a department that I know pretty intimately, that we survived on grants for the last several years. So our budget was this, and then as the grants started coming in, we started seeing this move the other way. Well, now the grants are drying up, and that money we used to have for certain PPE or air monitors or whatever is now gone. And now they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get back to this level when we're down here? You know, that pendulum's gone the other way now.
Right. Instead of taking advantage and using everything, they offset one budget with another, and now that one's gone.
Right. Exactly.
You know, something that after we did that show yesterday, you know, which honestly I just looked at it real quick. It was almost 400 views in the last 27 hours since it's been out, which is decently good. You know, people checking it out. But one of the questions I got, a couple of them via email or text, was how do I tell the kids? Like, I don't know if it's really. I think it's a valid question. Is that different age groups don't understand why we're doing it, and if they're not playing, you know, with the, like you said, the dirty hand, clean hand, or something like that. Like my kids are 11 and 13, and when I told them, I said, you know, you might not be sick. I might not be sick, and you might be bulletproof with this stuff. I said, but all it takes is me to come home, me to have, you know, give you a high five, then you to go to grandma's house and give her a kiss, and she's dead.
Right, and you killed grandma.
Yeah, and indirectly and not intentionally, but I think a lot of this might have to be a little bit of a, and I would like to honestly talk to like a psychologist about how to properly tell the kids this is why we're doing what we're doing, so they're not just like, well, this stinks and I don't understand it, so I'm not playing by the rules.
Right.
Right.
I think they would say that you are to use age appropriate wording in order to talk to them, and not to use fear, but to use fact and to be straightforward with age appropriate type language.
Yeah, just start out with something like, if you want to kill grandma, keep doing what you're doing.
Right. You know that swimming pool you really wanted? Well,
this is it. Shock and awe.
This is how you do it.
Worst educators ever.
Hey, listen, I teach firefighters, not kids, okay? What do you want from me?
They are kids. They're just older.
That's true. What was I just saying about our sense of humor that some people may not get?
Nobody listening to this show, though. Everybody listening to this show will totally understand.
No, but kids are off from school for a couple weeks, and they're like, well, why can't I go and hang out with my friends? And I'm telling them they can go out with their friends. They can go to the field and play lacrosse off the wall. They can go for bike rides. They can go for runs. They can go for exercise. They can go and hang out with their friends. They just can't have sleepovers. And everybody's trying to pull the screen time down with the kids, but this is one time you should basically be like, all right, like the lid's off. If you want to have screen time, have Roblox parties or whatever the hell the kids are doing. I don't know, but let them do it. But at the same time, it doesn't mean they can be couch potatoes and just veg out. Get them going out. There's nothing saying you're not on a house quarantine,
right? And a park on a nice sunny day is actually a relatively safe place in terms of viruses don't live long in sunlight. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that like you should let your kids run wild and lick the poles at the park, but if you follow basic stuff, you have the potential to be at this point a little bit okay. Go for that bike ride, go play outside. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Don't touch other people's faces. If it's wet and sticky and not yours, don't touch it. All that happy stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. We could probably get that through to our younger kids, but I got to tell you, I don't know if it's made the news up where you guys are. We've got some real geniuses here in Florida, and I say that because the beaches in certain areas of the state are packed with spring breakers. The invincible people. They're not getting the message.
I'm less concerned about that than I am about bars that are running like Corona parties and stuff like that. Indoor at night with people, drinking out of the glass that the bartender might have taken below the deck, gave it a quick rinse in the same sink that he might have the right soap or maybe has the sanitizer or something like that. That is asking for problems. And now I'm seeing on the different groups I'm on, these bars are shocked that they're being boarded up under police because they violated the curfew / recommendations, CDC, whatever the hell it is. But there's many bars, and they're all, listen, I understand bars got to live and everything like that. But right now, bars, I think everybody is conscious of the economic impact of this thing. And I told, we have the food in the house, but she's like, well, what do you want to cook tonight? I'm like, why don't we order out and support a small business? They do curbside pickups for they bought cabbage and corned beef tonight from a place. They brought it right into the car. And that's my little part of supporting the group. Now, the bars now, from what I understand, at least where we live, they're doing takeout beer. Like, you're not going to be able to drink in the car while you're driving and everything, but they will give you closed 6-packs, I believe, to the car, so you can go. Okay, I'm supporting I'm doing my thing.
Yeah, our liquor stores are open. Matter of fact, well, you guys saw the little thing I sent out earlier in our little group, but I went to our specialty liquor store and loaded up on beer, wine, and cigars because all the bars are closed. Restaurants are open, but all the bars are closed. Effective 5 o'clock today, per the governor of Florida.
Wow. For
30 days.
And I don't think that's outlandish. I think, honestly, at least where we're sitting, the United States, I think United States as a nation, the entire nation is going to be on pause for 30 days.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I would say that that's probably a minimum, because
totally.
you know what's going to happen 2-3 weeks. You have a combination of testing getting out there, numbers are going to start to exponentially explode, and you're going to start to see the actual death toll really rising. And as soon as you start to get that, oh, I know somebody in the 5th degree, the 4th degree of separation, 3rd degree of separation, that will just make people be like, wow, we're not doing enough. We need to take it one step further, one step further, one step further.
Well,
So
I would say that the three of us and the people that are watching this are kind of in the know, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I carry. I haven't tested. So I can't definitively say so until we get just about 100% of the population tested, we're not going to know where the boundaries are and where this timeline goes. If we keep the current amount of testing, and I'm not pointing fingers, I just don't think that there's a transport mechanism to get it to everybody as quickly as we want to. But nonetheless, if we were able to say, Bob Kosh, not positive, put into that pile. Okay, great. I put him into a pile, and once I start figuring out these piles, I can start figuring out what the trajectory of this whole thing is. Until we know the numbers, there's no projections.
Yeah, well, like I'll give you an example. My son over the weekend on Saturday, at 8 o'clock at night, spiked 104.3 degree fever. Didn't break with Motrin, didn't break with Tylenol. By the end of he woke up in the morning, he was at 308. A couple hours later, we went to the doctor and he was back to normal. And now I'm reading reports that is in kids almost the path that this virus takes. So what does that mean? There wasn't testing over the weekend. I have no idea if I was exposed. I have no idea if I'm carrying currently.
Yeah. That's something I would love to just kind of rule it out. And I'm sure it's going to come out in the next week or so. There's going to be a greater availability of but even there's testing stations where me and Mike lived. I know there's like drive-through tents, and these things are going to pop up in bulk. And I highly recommend you, for at least peace of mind, going over to this thing and getting a swab. They basically stick a toilet plunger up your nose, and they give you a little swabby do, and then they text you the results within 24 hours, I believe it is. I think that's how they're doing it right now.
But I still think you need a reason at this point, right? You have to have a fever.
Yeah, because I want to get ruled out.
Right.
But nonetheless, I mean that's pretty good, and it's not inconvenient, and I think it puts a lot of the unrest to bed. Is that okay? Within 24 hours, I'm going to definitively know if I have it or don't have it, and if I do, I can take the appropriate precautions, which I think everybody on the planet knows now, is just basically lock yourself in the house and don't expose yourself and ride it out.
Right.
Because there is no. They're currently coming up with a vaccine, and it's amazing that whole idea of how they did it. They went from plug and play parts to what I was hearing on the news this morning is the fastest fast track of a viral antiviral in the history of mankind. Like, this thing is being fast tracked insane. In fact, I saw a picture of the first human test of it today. So incredibly fast, incredibly proficient work. But I just don't think I don't disagree. I think they're going to have to eventually open the scope and say, listen, we just want to rule people out. Right now, if you're maybe symptomatic or you have probable cause to think you may be symptomatic, they're probably putting you through the tent. But if you're not, stay home.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting. We'll have to just, as they say, hunker down and, everybody hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm really interested.
Cheers.
Cheers. What I would like to hear from the audience, and I'll probably try putting this out over the Facebook, the group, is just indications of how things are going in your neck of the woods. What are you seeing? What are you doing? And we should archive this. We should not archive, but we should document the growth of this from the hazmat world, the first response world, how this grows, what problems people are seeing, from a street level. And it would be, I think, an interesting case study to look back on in time and say, all right, like this was the hot spot in this area. When we hit this critical mass, these are the resources that disappeared. This is what they had to resort to.
Yeah, and then in 2 weeks, when we see you next Tuesday, in 2 weeks.
Yep.
We can see what we've gathered and do a comparison.
It would be a see you
just
next
in 2 weeks.
See you
Tuesday.
next Tuesday.
Yeah, see you next Tuesday.
Right.
Double Tuesdays, right. Double next Tuesday.
Awesome.
Well, there really isn't a whole hell of a lot going on. Has anybody seen anything else hazmat related besides the coronavirus? It has pretty much encompassed the group.
24/7, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't honestly just picked my head up. I've been kind of bulk studying everything I can about this whole thing because epidemiology is not my forte. However, between me and Mike, and I'm sure Kosh is getting the same thing, we're getting a lot of questions via text or, email or phone calls or just through Facebook groups and stuff like that. And they're not expecting us to have all the answers, but at least point them in the right direction. And it's, it's not my strong suit, so I'm trying to catch up with that. I really haven't been really looking all that much into other hazmat things. Listen, hazmat hasn't stopped. Life hasn't stopped. But I will say traffic is delightful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, traffic, I'm sure. You know what? Let me throw this out to you because it has been something that has been bothering me since I talked to this person who is attempting to reuse PPE. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying that that's acceptable. But we all know in crisis that, and in lack of resources, firefighters do whatever it takes to get by. How would you guys attempt to reuse PPE? I mean, this is a recommendation. This is just like a total, like a total hypothetical. Like if you had to do it, none of us are lab experts here, but if you had to do it because your choice was literally throw away those gloves and use nothing the next time, or at least keep them and attempt to practice some level of personal protection in a time of absolute crisis, what would you do?
I don't even want to say it, quite honestly, because somebody's going to go out there. But at a minimum, the only thing I would do is if I ran out of masks or something like that, I would go to an SCBA if I had it available. I would go to a PAP or an APR first, but then an SCBA. But if you're not an agency like an ambulance company that has that, man, I don't know. I don't know that I would reuse that. I would try to come up with something, but I don't know that I would reuse anything, quite honestly.
I would really take a hard and fast look at the risk versus reward.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I'm saying? Because, yes, we're here to help, and yes, we're here to do the right thing. And at a certain point, if I do take this step forward to recontaminate myself with PPE that I know isn't correct or clean or whatever it is, and you can bet your ass you're going to be put into a very uncomfortable position, self-quarantining, possibly dying, and so
then what's the option? Deny service?
Yeah. Honestly, it comes down, I hate to say it this way, but it's going to be like, in the plane, when the oxygen mask drop down, you don't put on the kids first, you put on yours so that you can affect the kid. Well, if you take me out of the service and I can affect care to 600 people for one person, then it's not for the greater good.
Right. And what they're telling, I don't know if you guys are getting it up there, but what they're saying down here is when you call 911, let them know what you have. They're recommending the doc in the box via the phone, which I've used a couple times. It's great apps. And unless it's an emergency that you have to be transported to the hospital, it may be something where, and I know our medical directors and whatnot are looking, where they get a refusal or they deny transporting you and tell you, hey, you need to stay home, to try to minimize that. I mean, I think they're still working through the legalities of all that, but yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to be transporting people unless they're of that severity, and meet, whatever different criteria that local area, decides on.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know if there's a real answer to that, Mike. I mean, because reusing pieces is, I think, a general no-no in the medical field.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, so is picking and choosing who dies, and yet, from a doctor's point of view, that triage conversation is happening right now on a national level.
It comes down to that whole, do no harm as part of their the Hippocratic oath. If you're going from one person to the next person with the same stuff, then you are intentionally contaminating the next guy down the line. So,
right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you're moving the contamination. So if I worked on somebody that had corona and the next guy did not have corona, you just gave him the corona. So like,
okay, but if they have a all right, so all right, hold on. Let's stick with that thought, right? Because I almost have a scenario that challenges that chain of thought.
Okay.
If I have a person who has I don't know, a chemical exposure, right? We often say do the best you can, but they need to be medically treated, right? So let's say they're having a heart attack and they're contaminated. We would say cut you out of the suit and get them to the hospital. Let's not necessarily worry so much about the chemical. The heart attack is going to kill you first. So
right.
if I have somebody who requires urgent medical attention as a first responder, and I'm using something that could potentially contaminate them, what's going to kill them first?
Well, is the heart attack going to kill me as the responder? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a little bit, and now because I am the responder, I have 10 days of contaminating other people because of what I did here. I don't know. I don't think there's a real right answer to this. I think if they can't protect their responders, the responders, and I'm not saying that the responders should do this, but that whole area should mutual aid to another area that can handle it and either send it out until they get the equipment. I don't think pushing on is the right answer. I think shutting down, getting the equipment, re-popping up is the best move. Just basically move your people to somewhere else.
What about a designated response team for that specific illness? Meaning, you look on the run sheet or the computer and it says possible coronavirus. That goes to a dedicated, kind of like we did in 2001 with all the powder calls. We had designated powder response units. Thereby you can keep them together. You can quarantine them, if you will, document. I don't know how you'd go about it, but at least you're minimizing a whole firehouse getting wiped out or a department getting wiped out. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think it's a question for another show. I mean, because this is evolving very quickly. And listen, guys, if you want to comment on it, go onto the YouTube, the Facebook, all the channels that we're all on, and give some suggestions and start a conversation about this, because I don't think this is going away, like Mike and Bob said, for a minimum of 30 days. And I would not be surprised about the 90 days before we even get the lid on this thing, or at least a lasso around this thing. But I would like to thank Ron Huffman and the Responder Training Enterprises, Mike Allen at Northeast Haz Mat, and our good friend down there at Intercoastal. I'm sorry.
Intercontinental Training Fire Academy.
Yeah, and also Todd Burton and the TB Metal Art. Look at his incredible stuff on Facebook.
Love
TB
Todd.
Great stuff. God, it's beautiful.
And Haz Mat 101 consultants, always there in a pinch, especially when your corona problems come up. You give them a call and they'll walk you through it. So without any further ado, we'll be talking to you maybe within in a shorter time frame for a PSA, but nonetheless, we'll be back here. We'll see you in next Tuesday.